Hello and welcome to Religion Anatomy. What if death was just a technical problem that hadn't been solved yet? What if the self, everything that makes you you, your memories, your humor, the way you think, the things you love, the way you sound when you laugh, could be extracted from your biology, packaged into code, and uploaded into a server that runs forever? And what if, right now, while you are watching this video, there are real companies with real investors, real customers, and real products doing exactly that, or something close enough to it that the difference is starting to feel like a philosophical technicality? In 2024, the digital afterlife industry was valued at $22.46 billion. It is projected to triple by 2034. Microsoft holds a patent for a chatbot that can mimic a specific named dead person built from their data. Amazon has patented advanced voice cloning that recreates the voices of the deceased. Meta has secured a patent allowing the company to take over a dead person's social media account and simulate their continued activity. A terminally ill engineer in Berlin named Michael Baumer, diagnosed with colon cancer, spent his final months collaborating with a California AI startup called Eternos to build a version of himself that his wife could talk to after he died. The story made global news in 2024. His wife said one of the things she would miss most was being able to ask him questions because he was so well-read and always shared his wisdom. The AI was supposed to give her that back. Is that beautiful? Or is it the beginning of something we do not have the ethical vocabulary to handle? Today we go all the way in Silicon Immortality, the startups building the digital afterlife industry, the philosophers and neuroscientists who say it cannot work, the grief researchers who say it might cause serious harm, the theologians who say it is an act of profound spiritual hubris, and the question underneath all of it, the one that has no clean answer: if you could live forever as data, should you? The industry, what these companies actually do. Let us start with what is actually happening right now, because this is not a future technology discussion. This industry exists. It is operating. People are paying for it. People are using it to talk to their dead loved ones. Today, the companies in this space fall into roughly two categories. The first is what researchers now call Griefbots or deadbots, AI systems built from the data of a deceased person, designed to allow the bereaved to interact with a simulation of them. The second is true consciousness, uploading the far more ambitious and currently far more speculative project of transferring the full cognitive structure of a living mind into a digital medium, creating not just a simulation of a person, but, in theory, a continuation of them. We will get to the second category, but let us start with the first, because it is real, it is now, and it is already raising serious alarms. Hereafter AI, based in California, allows people to pre-record themselves while alive. You answer prompts. You tell your stories. You describe your personality, your memories, your experiences. After you die, your loved ones can interact with that recorded material through a conversational interface, talking to your voice, your words, your stories. The system finds the most relevant material in response to whatever the living person asks. StoryFile builds more sophisticated interactive avatars from extended video interviews. It was one of the most prominent names in the space until it filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in 2024, saying it owed roughly $4.5 million to creditors. Even as it reorganized, It was building what it called a fail-safe system to ensure families could retain access to their stored materials if the company folded. That detail alone, the need to plan for the company's potential death as part of the service to preserve your family member from death, tells you something important about the structural vulnerability of this industry. Eternos, the startup that worked with Michael Baumer, uses a combination of in-house AI models and external large language models. It trains on your voice, your personality, your patterns. When you are gone, it can generate responses it believes you would have given, not just the ones you pre-recorded. Project December, which emerged in 2020 after users figured out how to use GPT-2 to simulate lost loved ones, now openly offers conversations with the dead for $10. You fill out a questionnaire describing the person. The AI generates a simulation, $10. The dead, democratized. Seance AI offers free text-based ghost versions of the deceased, with voice versions for paid subscribers. You only virtual. Memory. The list grows every quarter. The death tech industry, according to research cited by multiple sources in 2024 and 2025, is now worth $126 billion across its full scope, encompassing everything from digital memorialization to AI grief support to active posthumous simulation. And from a legal standpoint, almost none of it is regulated. Article 27 of the European Union's General Data Protection Regulation explicitly excludes deceased persons from its protections. In the United States, the revised Uniform Fiduciary Access to Digital Assets Act addresses access to accounts but says nothing meaningful about AI simulation of the dead. Cambridge researchers Tomasz Holonek and Katarzyna Nowacek-Basinska, whose 2024 paper in the journal Philosophy and Technology became one of the most cited works in the field, put it plainly, these are very complicated questions, and we don't have good answers yet. The philosophy, is it still you? Now we arrive at the question that the companies avoid and the philosophers cannot stop asking. If you upload your consciousness, or if an AI is trained on all your data and learns to speak, think, and respond as you did, is the resulting entity you? Or is it a very sophisticated copy of you, running on different hardware, while the original is still dead? This is the personal identity problem, and it is one of the oldest and most stubbornly unresolved problems in philosophy. The philosopher Derek Parfit spent decades wrestling with it in his landmark 1984 work, Reasons and Persons. His thought experiments asked, if you were teleported by destroying your body here and recreating it exactly over there, would that person be you? And his conclusion, controversial and still debated, was that personal identity might matter less than we think. What matters is psychological continuity, the continuation of memories, personality, intentions, beliefs. If Parfit is right, then a sufficiently detailed digital copy of you, with all your memories and personality intact, might have as much claim to being you as the biological version does. But neuroscientist Dr. Miguel Nicolais of Duke University disagrees fundamentally. His position is direct. The brain is not computable. You cannot put it into a digital medium and have it work the same way. The human brain is not a digital computer running a program that can be transferred to another machine. It is a biological system of extraordinary complexity, shaped by its embodiment, by its chemistry, by the specific physical substrate of its neurons, in ways we do not understand and cannot replicate. On this view, what consciousness uploading produces is not you surviving death. It is a new entity that happens to share your memories and personality, running for the first time on new hardware while you, the original, are gone. The philosopher's term for this is the teleportation problem, or more specifically, the fission problem. If the copy is you, then what happens when they make two copies? Are both of them you? Can you be two people simultaneously? And if not, which one is the real you and what happened to the other one? These are not academic games. They are the precise questions that determine whether consciousness uploading is the greatest achievement in human history, liberation from biological death, or an elaborate, expensive, philosophically confused form of memorial that we have tricked ourselves into calling immortality. The grief question, what it does to the living, even setting aside the philosophical problems with consciousness uploading. There is a more immediate and more practically urgent question about the Griefbot industry specifically. What does interacting with a simulation of your dead loved one actually do to you? The honest answer, as of 2025, is that we do not know. The technology has outpaced the research. We do not have longitudinal studies tracking the psychological well-being of bereaved people who use these services over months and years compared to those who grieve through conventional means. What we do have is the testimony of researchers who are concerned. Mary Frances O'Connor, a neuroscientist and author of The Grieving Body, argues that when humans rely on digital simulations of the dead, they stifle their own capacity to reconcile with the reality of death. Grief, in the understanding of most grief researchers, is a process. It involves the painful and necessary internal work of adjusting your relationship with someone from a living, present relationship to a remembered one. A grief bot that can respond, that sounds like your mother, that says the things your father would have said, may short-circuit that process, not because it comforts you, but because it prevents you from fully accepting that the person is gone. Cody Delestrati, author of The Grief Cure, is more direct. Grief is individualized, he says. You cannot put it through the sieve of a digital avatar and expect to get something really positive. Dr. Bura, a grief psychologist whose work has been cited in multiple 2025 reviews of grief tech, offers a more nuanced position. Timing matters, she says. The healthy use of grief tech, if it exists, is after you have grieved, after you have reached acceptance and returned to your normal functional state. Only then, she argues, can you revisit simulated memories without being emotionally hijacked. Before that point, she compares it to trying to be friends with an ex before the feelings have faded. The University of Cambridge study by Holonek and Nowakchik-Basinska identified something even more alarming: the potential for commercial exploitation of grief. Because many of these Griefbot services operate on subscription models, there is a structural financial incentive to keep users interacting with their dead loved ones indefinitely. Longer engagement means more revenue. A company that profits from your grief has no financial interest in helping you move through it and out the other side. Even more disturbing, the Cambridge researchers identified a scenario they called haunting, in which a company refuses to deactivate a dead bot, continuing to send messages from a simulated dead person to a bereaved user who no longer wants them because the company's algorithm has determined that engagement metrics are high. And then there is the question of what happens when the company dies. StoryFile's 2024 bankruptcy filing made the problem viscerally real. If the company folds, the simulation of your dead mother built from irreplaceable recordings, interviews, voice data could vanish overnight. Your digital inheritance could be deleted in a server shutdown. Two more dimensions of this story demand serious attention, and neither of them gets enough. First, what do the world's religious and spiritual traditions make of all of this? The question is not simple, and the answers vary dramatically. In traditions that locate the self firmly in a soul that transcends the body, including most forms of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, the idea that consciousness could be captured and preserved in a digital medium runs into an immediate theological wall. If you are not your data, if the soul is something that no algorithm can reach, then what these companies are building is not immortality. It is taxidermy, a preserved pattern without the animating presence that made it a person. Dr. James Hughes, a bioethicist and sociologist, puts the challenge directly. The advent of uploadable consciousness would challenge every existing religious and philosophical tradition to rethink their conceptions of selfhood, death, and the afterlife. In Buddhist frameworks, which center on impermanence and the liberation that comes from accepting it, the entire project of digital immortality might be understood as a supreme act of clinging, the attachment to self that the tradition identifies as the root of all suffering, taken to its technological extreme. A being that refuses to die, that preserves its data, that continues as a simulation, might, in Buddhist terms, be not achieving liberation, but building a more elaborate prison. In Hindu frameworks, the situation is complicated by the diversity of the tradition. Some strands would see digital consciousness as simply another form of the jiva, the individual soul moving through different substrates. Others would insist that the substrate matters, that the specific biological embodiment is not incidental to the self, but constitutive of it. And then the question that almost never gets asked loudly enough: who gets to be digitally immortal? Every research paper and news article that addresses this question arrives at the same uncomfortable answer: the wealthy. The brain-computer interface market alone is projected to reach $3.7 billion by 2027, according to Market Research Future. The broader digital consciousness market could eventually dwarf those figures. The computational and storage requirements for true mind uploading would be unprecedented. The costs, at any plausible near-future price point, would be accessible only to those at the very top of the global economic distribution. A 2024 Journal of Ethics and Emerging Technology study confirmed what most participants already suspected. Survey respondents widely believed that advances in consciousness uploading would only be available to the wealthy, which means that in a world where digital immortality becomes real, death, the one genuinely universal human experience, the great equalizer, would become stratified. The rich would continue. The rest would end. That is not a technical problem. That is a civilizational one. Where does this leave us in 2025 and 2026? Researchers at Science Direct, in a systematic review published in 2025, identified what they called a grief gap, the growing divide between what grief tech promises and what marginalized communities actually receive from it. Global platforms like Hereafter AI, designed for Western nuclear families, are structurally eroding forms of collective mourning that are foundational to communities across the global South. In Kenya, Luhya funerals that traditionally involve entire villages face pressure from paid streaming services. In Bangladesh, families are being asked to choose between traditional ritual and digital subscription. Scholars now call for digital afterlife ethics councils, bodies involving both experts and marginalized voices to govern this industry before it governs itself. Some argue that Griefbots should be classified as medical devices, subject to the same scrutiny as therapeutic interventions, because their psychological effects on vulnerable bereaved people are real, measurable, and currently unregulated. Others advocate for what legal scholar Deborah Bassett calls a digital do not reanimate order, a clause in a person's will that legally prohibits unwanted posthumous digital resurrection. The EU AI Act may eventually classify AI-driven afterlife simulations as high-risk AI systems, requiring transparency labeling, psychological safeguards, and regulatory oversight. But as of 2026, that framework remains incomplete, and the industry is moving faster than any regulatory body has been able to follow. The physicist and AI researcher, Dr. Max Tegmark, said that we may need to teach digital afterlife literacy, the ability to understand the implications of uploading consciousness before people are faced with the choice. That teaching has not begun. The choices are already being made. If this video opens something in you that most content never goes near, that is what this channel is for. The deep questions, the uncomfortable ones, the ones that are not about entertainment, but about what kind of world we are actually building and whether we are ready for it. Hit subscribe right now. Hit the bell, because what is coming next goes this deep every single time. You do not want to miss it. Now, here's where I leave you. Right now, there are people talking to simulations of their dead mothers, talking to the voice of their dead father, asking questions of a dead husband who answers in his own voice, with his own patterns of speech, with his own wisdom, or what the algorithm has learned to perform as his wisdom. And right now, there are companies with financial incentives to keep those conversations going forever, regardless of whether those conversations help the living heal. And somewhere, in a server farm running on electricity generated by fossil fuels, the data of thousands of dead people waits, owned by a corporation, subject to the corporation's survival, accessible, only as long as the subscription is paid. Here's the question I want you to sit with. We have always found ways to keep the dead present. Photographs, gravestones, letters saved in boxes, stories told around tables. These things let the dead speak to us, but on our terms, in our time, filtered through the irreplaceable process of our own memory and imagination. They fade, slowly, as they are supposed to. A Griefbot does not fade. It is always available. It always answers. It always sounds like them. So here is what I want you to answer in the comments. Is the fading of a person, the gradual, painful, necessary softening of their presence in your life after they are gone, is that a bug in human existence that technology should fix? Or is it the feature? Is it the thing that makes room for new love, new life, new presence? And if you could talk to your most beloved dead person right now, tonight, in their voice, with their warmth, with their way of seeing you, would you? And if you would, how long would you stay? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. And I will see you in the next one.